You don't need to be the loudest in the room to be the most respected, but if your voice doesn't carry authority, people stop listening. Today, I'll show you 3 simple vocal patterns that can instantly shift how people respond to you, not by force, but by presence. Because when your voice speaks with purpose, the world leans in. Most people speak to be heard, but those who command authority, they speak to be felt. Let's start with the one thing that's constantly overlooked: cadence, the rhythm of how you speak. Your pace, your pause, your flow. It's not just about what you say, it's how you carry the words. And yet, we live in a world where everyone's in a rush, rushing to respond, rushing to sound smart, rushing to fill the silence. But have you noticed, the most powerful voices are rarely in a hurry? They take their time, and people wait for their next word. There's a quiet confidence in someone who doesn't feel the need to race through their thoughts. It's like they're saying, "I'm not performing, I'm leading," and that's what cadence can do. It separates performers from leaders. Think about the last conversation where you truly listened, really locked in. Odds are the speaker had control over their delivery. They didn't just throw information at you, they invited you into it. And they did that by owning their rhythm. See, most people speak on autopilot. They open their mouths and let their thoughts stumble out as fast as possible. They're uncomfortable with silence, afraid the listener might drift off if they take too long, but that's not how influence works. Influence doesn't live in speed, it lives in space, space to breathe, space to think, space to let meaning settle in. When you slow your speech, not to a crawl, but to intention, you shift the entire energy of the room. People stop scrolling. They stop multitasking, they tune in, because something about your delivery tells them this matters. You matter. I've seen it happen in boardrooms, classrooms, courtrooms, and even coffee shops. The person who slows down, who speaks as if every word is worth something, holds the room without needing to raise their voice. Because their pace says, "I'm not trying to convince you, I'm showing you." Let me give you a simple example. Imagine someone says, "You need to get this done," and now imagine them saying, "You need to get this done." There's a difference, isn't there? That pause between the words, it adds gravity. It doesn't change the content. It changes the weight. That's what cadence does. It gives your words density. It forces people to engage, not just with your words, but with your presence. And that's where real authority lives, not in volume, but in energy. Now, I get it, sometimes we rush because we're nervous. We feel like we're on the spot, our heart races, and so our words try to keep up. But here's the truth. Authority doesn't rush, because when you're secure in what you're saying, you don't need to rush through it. You stand in it, you let the words work for you, not against you, and when you practice that kind of control, when you own your rhythm, you begin to separate yourself from the noise. People start noticing that you don't just talk, you lead, you carry your message like it has value, and the more you value your message, the more others will too. The real shift happens when you stop chasing quick responses and start creating resonance, because when someone says something fast, it might hit the ears. But when someone says something with rhythm, with power, it hits the heart, and people don't remember noise, they remember impact. Let me tell you what that looks like in everyday life. You're in a meeting, everyone's throwing ideas around, talking fast, trying to impress. And then you speak, calm, steady, deliberate, no rush, just clarity, and suddenly, the temperature of the room changes, people lean in. Why? Because your cadence doesn't beg for attention, it commands it. Or maybe you're having a tough conversation, emotions are high. Voice is raised, but you slow it down. You don't mirror their chaos, you set the tone, and in doing so, you reset the dynamic. You become the anchor in the room, and when you become the anchor, you earn the authority. It's not magic. It's not some secret gift you're born with, it's a skill, and like any skill, it can be developed. You start small, you pay attention to your breath, you notice where you tend to speed up, where you get nervous. And instead of pushing through, you pause, you let the pause do the work for you, and the more you practice that, the more natural it becomes. You begin to trust the silence, you begin to trust your message, and once that happens, your voice becomes more than sound, it becomes leadership in motion. You don't need to be loud, you don't need to say a lot. You just need to mean what you say, and give it room to land. Because when you own your cadence, you don't just speak, you lead. Most people never think twice about their tone. They focus on the words, the structure, maybe even the logic of what they are saying, but tone is where the real authority hides. It's the emotional fingerprint of your voice, and whether you realize it or not, it's shaping the way people perceive you before you even finish your first sentence. We all know what it feels like to be around someone whose tone doesn't match their words. They say they're fine, but their voice betrays the truth. Or they say something meant to motivate, but it comes out sounding condescending. That disconnect between message and tone breaks trust. Because tone is how people decide if you mean what you say, it's how they decide if they'll follow you or forget you. Now here's the thing, tone isn't just about being loud or soft. It's not about yelling to show strength or whispering to show gentleness. It's much deeper than that. Tone carries energy, intention, emotional weight. It's the difference between a command and a suggestion. Between a threat and a promise, between someone trying to be heard and someone who already is, there's something magnetic about a person who understands how to control their tone. They're not all over the place, they're steady, measured, and more importantly, they're consistent. Their tone creates an environment. It makes people feel something, and the right tone, it makes people feel safe, seen, and willing to listen. That's how trust is built, not just by saying the right things, but by saying them in a way that aligns with what you stand for. Your tone becomes your signature, and once people begin to recognize it, they begin to rely on it. They associate your voice with clarity, with stability, with leadership. Let's break it down. Think about someone who's trying to establish a boundary. They might say, "I don't appreciate being spoken to like that." And now if their tone is shaky, unsure, or overly emotional, that boundary might fall flat. But if their tone is calm, grounded, and unwavering, even without raising the volume, the impact is undeniable. It says, "This line matters," and when your tone says something matters, people listen, even if they don't agree. Or think about a parent calming a child in chaos. It's not about yelling over the noise, it's about dropping into a quieter, firmer tone that brings everything else down with it. That's authority, and it works not just in parenting, but in leadership, in friendships, in every space where your voice needs to carry more than information, it needs to carry influence. But here's the challenge, most people either default to one tone all the time or let their tone be dictated by how they feel in the moment. Neither of those approaches works. If you want to lead with authority, you have to learn how to choose your tone. You have to become aware of it, like a musician tuning an instrument. You don't strum louder to fix a sour note, you tune it. And that's what we're doing with tone, we're tuning it to match the moment, the message, and the mission behind your words. That takes discipline, it takes awareness. You have to be willing to slow down enough to ask, what do I want this person to feel right now? Not just know, feel, because your tone speaks directly to the emotional brain. It cuts past logic and lands in the part of people that decides whether they'll trust you, remember you, or follow you. And sometimes that means softening your tone to de-escalate. Other times, it means sharpening it, making it firm but not aggressive. It's not about manipulation, it's about stewardship. You're stewarding the emotional experience of those around you. And the more intentional you are with your tone, the more you begin to carry peace, strength, and credibility wherever you go. I'll be honest with you, most people don't get this right away. They either ignore tone altogether or think they have to fake some version of confidence that isn't real. But authentic authority doesn't come from pretending, it comes from congruence. When your tone matches your truth, people don't just hear you, they believe you. And that's what changes everything. It changes the way your team responds in a meeting. It changes the way your kids listen when you're guiding them. It changes how people treat you in everyday conversations, because when your tone is clear, consistent, and grounded, it gives others something to stand on. They begin to associate your voice with strength, not noise, with wisdom, not ego, and over time, your tone becomes a tool, not to overpower, but to influence, to guide, to lead. You want to command authority, don't just focus on your words, train your tone, because the voice people follow isn't the loudest. It's the one that makes them feel the most certain. If there's one habit that separates people who simply speak from those who command attention, it's this. They know when not to speak, they understand the power of pause, how silence, when used with purpose, can speak louder than words. It's not just about the spaces between your sentences, it's about what those spaces communicate. Silence, when intentional, becomes a tool of authority. Most people avoid silence like it's a mistake. As soon as they finish a sentence, they rush into the next one, afraid the listener might lose interest. But here's the truth: silence doesn't signal weakness, it signals strength. The people who carry influence are the ones who are comfortable with space. They don't need to fill every moment with sound to prove they're in control. Their control is felt in their restraint. Think about any speaker, teacher, or leader who held your full attention. They weren't speeding through their message. They allowed moments to land. They gave you space to process. They made you wait just long enough to wonder what was coming next. That's not accidental, it's deliberate. They're using pause as a form of punctuation, not just to separate thoughts, but to underline them. Here's why this matters: when you speak with no pause, your words blur together. You don't give your listener a chance to catch up, to digest, to feel what you're saying. But when you pause strategically, purposefully, you give your words gravity. You give people a moment to lean in, and when people lean in, they're no longer just hearing you, they're engaging with you. Let's say you're giving feedback. You could rush through your point, trying to soften the blow, or you could say what needs to be said. Then pause, let it hang in the air. That silence tells the person across from you, this is serious. It gives weight to your message, and it gives them time to reflect before reacting. That's the power of pause. It shifts the emotional dynamic of a conversation. It slows the moment down, it adds tension, and tension isn't always a bad thing. Used wisely, it builds anticipation. It creates focus, it tells the listener that what's coming next matters. But the pause isn't just about drama, it's about presence. When you're willing to pause, it shows you're not in a rush to prove yourself, you're not scrambling for approval. You're standing in your message, giving it room to breathe. That kind of presence is rare, and when people sense it, they pay attention. Sometimes silence also gives you a chance to reset. In a heated moment, a pause can stop escalation in its tracks. It gives you a moment to gather your thoughts, to choose your next words with care, and that one pause, just a few seconds, can change the entire outcome of a conversation. That's not just communication, that's leadership. There's something deeply human about silence. It forces us to feel, to confront the moment. That's why it's uncomfortable for so many, but when you learn to be still in your voice, to not rush through discomfort, you send a different message. You say, I'm not afraid of this moment, I can hold it, and that unspoken message, that quiet strength, is often more powerful than anything you could say out loud. The key is intentionality. You don't pause randomly, you pause with purpose, before an important point, after a key statement. Right before you ask a meaningful question. These moments, when paired with silence, become charged with significance. It's like highlighting a sentence in a book. You're telling the listener, pay attention here. You don't need to drag your words or speak in slow motion. That's not the point. It's about rhythm, precision, clarity. You speak your truth, and then you let it land. You let the silence do the rest. People remember how you made them feel more than what you said. And the feeling you leave behind often lives in the space between the words. That's where trust is built. That's where conviction is felt. That's where the real message lives. I've watched rooms shift with one well-placed pause. I've seen arguments diffused, tension dissolved, respect gained, not by saying more, but by saying less, not by shouting over noise, but by standing still in it. When you master the pause, you master the moment, and here's the truth: the pause isn't empty, it's full of presence. Full of weight, full of meaning. It's the space where your authority breathes, so don't run from silence. Use it, because when your words are wrapped in stillness, they echo longer and reach deeper. Authority doesn't just come from how you sound in the big moments. It comes from who you are in the small ones, the conversations no one sees, the way you speak when there's no audience. The voice you use with a friend, with a stranger, with your own thoughts. That's where real credibility is built. And the truth is, your voice won't matter if people can't trust it. See, consistency is what transforms a voice into a presence. A voice that sounds one way in public but another in private, that voice confuses people, it creates doubt. Because deep down, we're always listening for alignment. We don't just hear tone or cadence, we hear integrity, and when your voice carries the same strength, the same calm, the same clarity across every situation, it tells people, this is someone I can trust. That trust doesn't show up overnight. It's built slowly, like layers stacking on top of each other. Every time you choose to speak with honesty, even when it's hard, every time you keep your tone steady, even when emotions rise, every time your message lines up with your actions, that's another layer, and over time, those layers become a foundation. People begin to lean on your words because they've learned they can. Think about someone whose voice you respect, not just because of how they sound, but because of how they live. There's a sense that what they say comes from a deeper place, not performance, not persuasion, just truth. You know it when you hear it, and more importantly, you feel it, because consistency isn't just about repetition. It's about alignment. You can't speak with conviction if you don't live with it. You can't expect others to follow your lead if your words shift depending on who's watching. People don't want perfection, they want honesty. They want to know that the voice in front of them is real, that it's been tested, that it's rooted in something that won't change when the pressure hits. This is why voice and values are inseparable. If your values change in every room, your voice loses power, but if your values hold steady, your voice becomes unmistakable. It becomes a compass, not just for you, but for the people listening, and in a noisy world, a voice with direction stands out. It doesn't need to shout, it doesn't need to convince, it simply is steady, grounded, unshakable. That kind of voice doesn't just show up in moments of glory, it shows up in moments of pressure. When the spotlight's gone, when the stakes are high, when no one's clapping, that's where consistency reveals itself. Because anyone can sound confident for a few minutes, anyone can craft a good sentence, but not everyone can carry the same energy when life gets real. So the question isn't, how can I sound more powerful? The real question is, does my voice reflect who I truly am? If it doesn't, if there's a gap between how you sound and how you live, then your voice won't carry authority, no matter how polished it sounds. People will hear the disconnect, they might not name it, but they'll feel it, and once that feeling sets in, trust begins to slip away. But when your voice becomes an extension of your values, everything changes. You don't have to force confidence, it flows naturally. You don't have to chase respect, it begins to meet you, and over time, your voice builds something bigger than attention. It builds credibility, and credibility lasts. That's what we're really after, not applause, not popularity, but something deeper. The ability to show up, speak truth, and be trusted, whether you're standing in front of a crowd or sitting across from one person. Whether the moment is high stakes or routine, whether your words are long or short, your voice remains the same. Rooted, clear, consistent, that's how leaders are built, that's how influence spreads, through voices that don't just sound strong, but are strong. Because they've been shaped by something deeper than performance, they've been shaped by purpose. So the next time you speak, ask yourself, does this sound like me? Is my tone, my cadence, my pause, my presence aligned with who I truly am? Because when your voice and your values become one, people don't just hear you, they believe you, they follow you. And long after the moment is over, your words stay with them, not because they were loud, but because they were true.